This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today I'm going to talk about when you think you're better than your spouse, or maybe you don't say it like that, but you say, does my spouse understand how lucky they are? So many people would kill to be with somebody like me. And if you've ever thought that, then this is the episode for you. Hopefully, you're ready for some tough love. And before that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was on the gifts love language, and some people look down on gifts, and they shouldn't, because it's the same as when women look down on physical touch. Men especially look down on gifts, and that's because they have misconceptions about what a gift love language entails. So please do follow all the extra episodes by subscribing, $8.99 a month, and you get about over 185 other episodes, which is awesome. Okay, so some people come into couples counseling and they basically think that the couples counselor, it's like kind of like a fantasy, like that the couples counselor is going to hear the whole situation, then they're going to turn to the person's spouse and they're going to say, my God, man/woman, do you not understand how lucky you are to be married to this person? This person is hardworking. This person is intelligent. This person is giving and loving and fucking attractive too. And this person is just amazing. I mean, anybody would want to be married to them. Why don't you want to do exactly what they want? Which, of course, if it's a man, you feel like the therapist is going to say to the woman, why don't you want to have more sex with him? Or if it's a woman, so, a woman that hopes that the therapist says to the man, you're so lucky to have this wife, why don't you appreciate her more? Or why aren't you more, romantic or possibly hardworking, or whatever it is that the woman wants the man to be? Now, I'll tell you, there is nothing that gets the therapist to understand the situation more quickly than when one person comes in with a long list of grievances and implies that the other person is lucky to be with them. Immediately you know that you're dealing with some narcissistic traits, some delusion, right? Because this person has convinced themselves that that there is some world in which somebody would feel lucky to be criticized or berated. And even without the criticism, which is always there, so you don't have to say without it, but to be with somebody who thinks that they're such hot shit. And it's so the sort of person that thinks that anybody healthy would want to be with somebody who's always tooting their own horn. This is a level of lack of empathy, right? At the level that that they learned it at home. So who are the kind of people that think things like this? That my partner should consider themselves so lucky to be with me. They should be so grateful to be with me, because honestly, I am quite a bit better than they are. Who are the people who think that? Now, what do I always teach you? Where does it go back to? Family of origin. So the children that were repeatedly told that they should be grateful, that they don't have anything to complain about, that their parents are awesome. The same parents that are yelling at them right now, telling them all this, are awesome. And that, in fact, the parent's life sucked. But the parent, because they're so amazing, made everything so much better, and got to this place where they could be yelling at their kid right now to be grateful, which the kid should be grateful about. So if that was your upbringing, you don't even realize that you're turning around and doing it the same to your spouse. So you may do it to your kids, or you may think you're not going to because they're little, but when they get to be teenagers, if you don't watch yourself now and get into therapy, or at least listen to this podcast, it's a good first step. You'll find yourself saying the same kind of things to your kids that your parents said to you. Which feels like a nightmare to people, especially if they hate their parents, and then to find yourself saying the same things because you've never practiced any other ways of engaging, and you've never deeply processed, what it was to grow up in your home and how difficult it was and the marks that it left on you metaphorically. And so then you find yourself repeating the same exact history and the same kind of comments. Don't you see how you have no problems? I had problems. You don't have any problems. What are you complaining about? Right? So then you end up doing the same thing to your kids. But a lot of parents now, they don't do it to their kids, but they got to do it to somebody because it's like whack-a-mole, like they don't let themselves be anything but gentle parenting to the children. Too gentle parenting, in which case you can refer to my podcast, Stop Letting Your Kids Treat You Like Garbage. But then the spouse, they treat exactly like they used to get treated as a child. So that means if you had a narcissistic parent, a self-involved parent, a parent who is always the hero or the heroine of their story, the professional victim, who's the scrappy underdog and the true winner in their own mind. In their own mind, they're the fan favorite in any story, and they are better than everybody they come in contact with, especially the bank teller. That's a joke for people who know my bank story. I'll spare you the bank story, but every so often I do my professional victim bank story. But anyway, this scrappy underdog of a parent really thinks that they are the most awesome thing since sliced bread. And they repeatedly are just astonished when the child does not seem to give them their due, and nothing less than just complete worship would work for them. And so then the child grows up and they turn into somebody who either finds a narcissist to marry, and this is, of course, who marries the person, is always the adult child of a self-absorbed person, because otherwise they would not be drawn to this rhetoric, to this person. Or they become it themselves, and so you then become the person who says to your spouse, don't you see that you don't have any problems? I make it so you don't have any problems because of how wonderful I am. I'm always growing and learning. You're not. I am so intelligent. I've made a lot of money. Or if they're the stay-at-home spouse, I keep everything running like clockwork. And don't you see, because it can go either way, by the way. So the paid work can be the big deal, like I make so much money that you don't have any problems. Or it could be unpaid work. I keep everything running in this home, and that's why you don't have any problems, and so you could go do your stupid job. It could be anything. I mean, this could be, I've literally seen people that have, full-time help, all the money in the world, right? They don't work. They don't really do anything because they have a staff. But if they have this personality type, then they say, it's because I organize a social calendar that your life is so good. Or it's because I order the groceries online that you don't have to work. You could take anything. If you're this type of person and you have to say that you are better and that the person should be grateful for you, you can find anything in the world to say that this is why. And invariably, the therapist is thinking, oh my God, how does this person get treated at home? Is this kind of criticism, the usual? And it is. Because of course what you see in the therapist's office is like the tip of the iceberg or the one cockroach that you see when there's 100 in the walls. So at home, this is a constant mantra. The mantra is, I am better in whatever better means, smarter, more fit, works harder, cares more about the kids, whatever. And therefore, you should be lucky to be with me. And frequently, there are massive glaring deficits because this person that talks like this, by virtue of not understanding how unappealing this sort of way of talking is, you can already conclude that they have very limited empathy, which makes a lot of sense. It's completely understandable because they were raised by a parent with no empathy, who was also raised with a parent with no empathy. So we're not casting blame, right? Everybody struggles. But when you're raised with a parent with no empathy that tends to go on rants, then you turn into somebody with no empathy that tends to go on rants, or you marry that person. So, by the way, the person that's constantly getting told that they're not good enough, they are used to that from what they saw growing up too. Either one parent did it to another, or it got done to them. And so they, instead of becoming that, they end up marrying that. You only have two templates. It's either the one who's the victim or the one who's the perpetrator of when it's a victim-perpetrator thing. So you kind of pick whichever one subconsciously. You choose whichever one is more familiar to you / easier for you given your temperament. So a quieter person turns into the one who gets yelled at. A louder person is the one who yells, etc. So the point being, when there's this lack of empathy, then there's also really a lack of self-awareness. So often, as I said, like this, there could be glaring deficits. So for example, a man can work very, very hard and say that so many women would be so happy to have wonderful sex with him because he's such a hard worker. And he forgets that, of course, not only is he extremely critical by definition of what we're talking about, but he also has other glaring deficits. For example, he struggles with untreated depression and retreats to his room for, hours, days at a time, or he can't have any friends because he always thinks he's better than everybody. Or he alienates the neighbors because he's yelling all the time. Or the children are scared of him. Or whatever. Or he just can't do anything around the house at all and completely depends on her for everything practical. Whatever the case may be. And then, of course, when the woman says, you should be so grateful to have me, she can forget, things as basic as, she doesn't ever have sex with him. So then, therefore, no man would consider her to be an awesome wife because literally she is not affectionate. So it's a no from most men, but she seems to think that there's all these men that would be lining up because she has no self-awareness. And in the other case, the man has no self-awareness. So by virtue of thinking that you are better than your spouse, you're already going to be a very difficult person. And so you say, but aren't there people that literally are just better than their spouse? That's just the facts on the ground. And they're a nice person. So they don't have any narcissistic traits. They're just a nice person that happens to know factually that they're better than their spouse. So here's how that would work. You would twist your brain to equalize it the way that you do for your children. So is one of your children smarter than the other? Probably, right? I mean, they have to be. They don't have the exact same IQ. But to be a loving parent, you would say, well, the one is better at math and the other one's better at English. Or one of them's better at math and English, but the other one's better at sports, and that's a kinesthetic intelligence. Or one of them's really, really emotionally intelligent, right? So if you want to be a loving person and your goal is to make a marriage work, then you're always looking for ways that your spouse is in fact better than you. And you can always find them, always. And that's a lot of what we do in therapy in this situation is say, hold on a second. What about all of the ways that the spouse is great? What about the ways that nobody else would actually, not nobody, but very few people would put up with these things that you do, except for the spouse, And let's equalize the playing field and see both people objectively instead of one is better than they are and one is worse than they are, which both people are trapped in this crazy narrative. And the children, by the way, are the ones who suffer because they pick up on the one parent's disdain for the other one. And then they have to pick an ally. So either they join daddy in looking down on mommy or join mommy in looking down on daddy, whatever the case may be. Or they fight for daddy against mommy or vice versa, right? So the children are not allowed to just be children. They have to be little legal teams for one of the parents. And that is not fair for the children. But there is no situation, just to clear it up, where if you go around thinking that you're better than your spouse, and never mind thinking it, because there's only so much you could think it without expressing it. So there's no world in which you could express that you think you're better than your spouse without being in some way unhealthy. Really a pretty big way, I mean, it's not a kind of vague sort of thing. It is mean and it's wrong. Because by definition, this person is putting up with you and they're filling in all of your deficits, which you don't like to look at, because your parent, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, that your parent never focused on their own downsides. You didn't learn how to do that as an adult. You did not learn how to say, yeah, I'm good at X, but I'm really bad at Y. So you never saw your mother, let's say if she was the one who ranted, you never saw your mother say, yeah, I am really smart, but I am a difficult person. And I guess that's why I don't go up the ladder at work. I guess it's not that Sally hates me so much and tries to block me. That's just, I never really been able to get along with people. And if she had said some things like that, maybe you would be able to say, yeah, maybe I could read some more books quicker than my spouse. But you know what I can't do? Stay on top of the shit for the kids. I can't do the practical stuff. Here I am, the intellectual. And meanwhile, if the kids were waiting on me to remember their stuff, they'd be fucked. So it's so great that my spouse comes in and fills in a way that I cannot. Now, if you tell yourself, okay, well, look, I really am in a situation where I'm so much better than them in every single regard. And for example, they are an addict and I do everything for the kids and I make all the money and they don't do anything. They're in their room or they're, they don't come home at times and they this and they that. And they're just basically like my dependent or my ward and I do everything. Well, this is not a relationship that you should be in, right? But what you especially shouldn't do is verbalize how much better you are than this person. Because if you're choosing to stay with them, then you're making the kids hate this person. And even if you don't verbalize it as much as you think, your disdain is coming out somehow if you are in the dynamic that I'm talking about in this episode. And the dynamic I'm talking about in this episode is where it is expressed. And it may be expressed through eye rolls and condescension or, cutting remarks or little passive-aggressive jabs. Either way, if this person is truly good for nothing from your perspective, then you need to be in individual therapy thinking about how you can get out of this situation, because this is not something, your resentment is mounting and mounting and mounting. And maybe then you'll say, I can't because somehow this person's so vituperative that they're going to go for custody, but they're an addict and I can't give them custody. Well, then if you somehow think that you have to stay no matter what for the sake of your kids, then you got to where you got to get to where you do not communicate that you are better than them. Because you know what, the kids have eyes and they can see things. And if you communicate over and over that you're better, that just makes them hate you, and or hate the other one, the other parent. So no matter what, and most people are not in that situation. Most people are in a situation where they are doing half and their spouse is doing half, but for some reason, they just do not see their spouse as half. They see it as like 1% and them as 99% for the reasons that I'm telling you, because you grew up listening to a parent extol themselves. All right, I hope this was useful and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.